Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to Guitar Underground. I'm your host, Neil Santos, the creator of the Pentatonic Way. And today we're going to be talking about soloing for the song, not for the ego. Have you ever finished soloing and thought, wow, that sounded impressive, but maybe it didn't actually sound like it belonged in the song? I know I have. If you felt that way, you're not alone. A lot of guitar players typically get stuck because they feel that soloing is about showing all the things that they know, right? You've been practicing stuff and you want to show it off, right? And that's totally normal. But what the great players do is they serve the music first, And I think that is what sets them apart, ironically, not showing everything you know and just doing some crazy stunt show on the guitar is what makes their solos sound more powerful and timeless, right? So, think of an analogy, right? Soloing is like having a conversation. If someone walks into a conversation and then they give you a full 5-minute speech about themselves, that might feel a little awkward and self-serving, right? You might go, wow, that guy's really into himself, or gal. But when someone listens, responds, and interacts with what you're doing, then the conversation flows. It feels more natural. You get more out of it. Both sides get more out of it. So that's what great conversations are, and that's what great solos are, right? So we can strive for that. So today we're going to talk about 5 different pitfalls that you may be falling into that lead to overplaying, that lead to playing for your ego as opposed to playing for the song, like the title implies. And then we're going to talk about 5 actionable tips that you can take to help you play more with the song and less with yourself. That did not come out right. But okay, let's get into it. All right, so point 1, right? The song is the boss. The solo is not the main event, right? The song is. So you have to approach it that way. Like if every song the singer came out and started like scatting over the whole thing, every little trill and thing they could do, you might lose, interest in the song and it wouldn't have a flow. Or if the bass player came out and just went crazy over every song, or the drummer, if any other musician did it besides a guitar player, it would not be acceptable, but I think they know, they're more apt to play for the song than the guitar player is. We like to overplay, man. We got into the guitar for a reason, we were inspired by this flashy playing or the things that made us feel something. And we want to show that off in the technical approach to it, the sportsman-like approach where it's like, look at all the cool things I can do. So instead of asking, what cool thing can I play? We need to shift our mindset and think of, what does this moment need, right? Sometimes the simplest thing is what you need, I definitely fall into this category. I'll be playing for a while, playing a solo or improvising. And then I'm like, oh, I should play that. I should put that thing in that I've been working on, like a really fast, but then it sounds like I'm shoving it in there. I'm shoehorning it in here. Sometimes that makes sense in the context of what I'm doing. But then other times I'm like, that didn't really work out like I thought. Maybe something more melodic would have been better, and that's oftentimes when listening back that you think that. In the moment, maybe yeah, that was cool. And then after you're like, oh no, I definitely should have just played this other thing. So, stop trying to impress when you're playing and start trying to connect with the song. And that's tough. That's tough because you're like, oh, I haven't played anything fast in a while. They're going to think I suck or something, and I think that's a natural feeling, and you just have to I guess when I'm thinking that, I'm thinking that everybody in the audience is a guitar player that's like judging me on my chops. When in reality, barely anybody probably listening is a guitar player. Or if they are, they're not judging you, like by your technical prowess, right? They're just kind of like, yeah, this sounds good. Or like, wow, that guy's really trying hard over there, you know? Um, so yeah, that's point one. The song is the boss. That's a good place to start. Point two, space is musical, right? Miles Davis said music is what happens in between the notes. I think that's what he said, and that's who said it. That's who I attribute it to anyway, and it's a good lesson. You know, if you're playing continuously and you feel like you can't stop, then that's stressful and that's a lot of pressure, you know? So so one of the most musical things you can play in a solo I have written here is nothing, right? Space allows the music to breathe, just like a conversation. I feel like pressure when I'm talking to you here, like not to stop, you know? And I don't know if that's the right way to do it. I could just like pause. I was listening to an interview today with somebody and they'd ask him a question and then it would be a really long time before they answered. But like what happened was, and I'm like, oh, isn't my video buffering or like what happened? But what happened actually is I paid more attention. I'm like, what's happening? Why is it so quiet? And then he'd answer and I'd be like, really listening, like, oh, he really thought about his answer before he spoke. And I think that was, it is kind of like the same idea as this. Like, if you're continuously playing, people will just kind of start spacing out. But if you stop, you go, oh, what's happening? What went wrong? I guess that's the first impression that, I thought the people had. What went wrong? What's happening right now? But then you start playing again, and now they're fully paying attention, which I think is cool. And that's what we want, people to pay attention to what we're playing. So, yeah, I have it written here. Space, musical space, isn't a mistake. It's part of phrasing, right? Think of it like a punctuation in a sentence. Without pauses, everything becomes a run-on sentence. So that's point two. Space is the place. No, space is musical. Number two. Point three, simplicity wins. And this is kind of like what I was talking about before with doing all my like crazy nutty solos as fast as you can go. Sometimes simplicity wins in most cases. So I was thinking this the other day. I had a long trip. I took my boys up to Fun Spot, which is a famous place, like a video game arcade up in New Hampshire, about an hour away from where I am now. And I'd never been, and they'd never been. And that's where a lot of like big video game records were made. Like Broken, like Donkey Kong and whatnot. And I've always wanted to go. So I brought them there. It's an hour away. I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? Guys, I'm going to commandeer the radio for the first drive up. For at least 45 minutes, I'm going to play you Dark Side of the Moon from beginning to end. I don't think kids listen to enough like actual albums from beginning to end anymore. It's like single. And I think it's important. There's a continuity in those old albums that's a part of the artistry of it, right? And it's like there's a lot of thought given to it, especially with Pink Floyd. So we listened to it, and I loved it. I think they liked it. I don't know. I think so. But, listening to all those David Gilmour solos again, I was just like shocked, like how simple they are in a way. A lot of them are just, I'd be like, wow, he's only just played like 2 or 3 notes and they've gone around the progression like 4 or 5 times, but he's just bending it. He's really like working those notes to get the feeling out. And it's so memorable and so singable that it's just inspiring. You can get away with not that much. I mean, you can stretch a couple notes to fill a spot in just the right way that it uplifts the song, right? And I think that's part of David Gilmour's thing. And then it becomes singable and it becomes a part of the song, which is great. So, yeah. So I have written here some notes. Many iconic solos are surprisingly simple, like that. They're not simple because the player lacked ability, and that's the important thing to understand. When we're younger and playing, we're like, oh, that guy's no good. He doesn't do any fast stuff, like that's the benchmark is can he play fast? Can he play something that I can't even understand really what he's doing on the guitar? Because that's exciting. But these solos are simple because the player understood the moment, like we talked about before. So when you play and you've learned all these licks and you feel like you should use them to impress, it just becomes a collection of ideas, right? Instead of a story, a full story. And that's what we're going for. And, with this topic anyway, talking about playing for the song. So, yeah. I had another one. The goal isn't to show everything you know. The goal is to make the song better. Cool. That's number 3. Number 4, pitfall you might fall into, which will lead you down the path to playing for ego and not for the song, is motifs. Make songs memorable, or solos memorable, but also songs. There is, an idea where you repeat and develop a small idea, and that's called a motif. So maybe the motif is like, and then instead of doing something different, next time you wait a little bit and you. So you see, it's the same idea, but just a little different. And then. Maybe you changed chords there, So that's the idea of a motif. And you hear it all the time. And then you hear it in Pink Floyd. I heard it all the time. There's a song, I can't remember which one it is, but yeah, I won't go down that rabbit hole. But you listen to Pink Floyd, start listening to solos you love, Neil Schon, all those things. Or even, all right, I got one in mind. Ain't Talking About Love, right? Is that the one? Right? All motifs, like he does it 3 times and then at the end he wraps it up with it has the same rhythmic motif to it and he just brings it somewhere else and resolves it, And I know that David Lee Roth, I've heard or seen little clips where he's talking about how they would do solos back in the day. And he'd be like, yeah, man, like they used to do solos and they were thematic, and then then they got into the new way of recording. And I don't know if he liked it or not, but it sounded like he didn't like it. But where Eddie would just do a bunch of solos, like record them all, and then just kind of piecemeal them together, like cut them together. And then he'd have to go and learn the solo after. And, that led to some amazing solos. I'm thinking Panama or Jump and all those things. But there is something to be said for those thematic solos, the ones with the motifs. And they don't have to be as strictly motif as that, They can have some sort of variation to it. You can have a motif and then play something else and then bring the motif back 20 seconds later, and just pepper it throughout your whole solo. There's so many ways to approach it. You can take a motif and then flip it on its head. So instead of it can be, just go the other way, but has the same rhythmic motif or something. Or, a motif could be a pattern, like the... Something like that, like Nuno does. That's the motif, is that idea, and then he's bringing it around the neck. I mean, that's a complicated one, but that fits the song. You know what I mean? That's singable. And it's not just like shredding like something that's more random. Listen to this for like a whole solo, you'd be like, ugh, I can't take anymore. But when he plays to the song too, the solos, and is able to mix in cool stuff, right? Cool guitar stuff, which makes him, that's what makes him so great. I know that, Brian May, I'm going to say one of his heroes is Brian May. He also plays to the song for sure. Like he's so, I was going to say composthetic. He's such a composer type soloist, too. So, but it's tough. It's tough when you're improvising to do this stuff and not just get carried away, to be able to compose in the moment. And I think that's what makes great improvisers is that they improvise something that sounds composed, which is, that's the goal, I guess. Also to just put out a ton of energy and just make people go nuts. That's the real goal, I guess. But yeah, motifs. Try to say something twice, like if you think about it as a speaking thing, people use it in poems all the time. They'll repeat a phrase and then go off and repeat a phrase and go off. Or I think of like the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King, where I have a dream that this and this and this. And he goes off and then I have a dream that together we'll do this, 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 that's what made it so powerful. And then the whole speech became known as I Had a Dream speech, right? So that's his kind of motif. I don't know if that's what they call it in, writing, but yeah, that's the idea, Or like, here's your sign, right? The Jeff Foxworthy bit. Or you may be a redneck, whatever, like that sort of stuff. It's a motif in a comedy sketch, in a stand-up routine. So it works in any sort of performative art, where you're creating art over time, bringing it back to something, gives it like a through line or whatever, makes it feel connected. So that's number 4. Point 5 is feel will beat flash every time, right? I feel like, you hear it all the time. Where people that play really fast get criticized out there in the guitar world. I was like, yeah, but he's not playing with feeling or whatever. I mean, you can have both, but I feel like a nice ratio would be 80% feel-based licks and phrases and 20% flash and pyrotechnics, right? And, I feel like feel-based would be like Brian May, Billy Gibbons, any of those blues guys, but then it's Slash. But then that pyrotechnics would be like the flashy stuff that you add. And I think that's important. Like thinking of pyrotechnics, like a fireworks display. You see like psh, psh, they shoot some off, and then there's points where they go crazy and there's like a ton of stuff going on in the air. And that's when people they freak out. And then they, go back to some like 1 or 2 at the air and they're making like little designs and stuff. And at the end, they have the big finale with they're all going off and you got sparklers at the bottom and they got things going off way high and they got some loud ones, boom, boom, and it's like, it makes for a show, right? You can't be like constantly going like all the time. It just, it might be cool at first, but after a while you'd be like, okay, all right. Like it loses its impact is what I'm saying. So definitely go for feel over flash. Like if you can't play flashy, that's not a problem. You can still play all day and people will love hearing you. If you're melodic, if you're repeating ideas, if you're leaving space, all these things we talked about. But if you're flashy and you can't play with feel, that's more of a problem, I think. Like It's all style and no substance. So, what I say? Music isn't a gymnastics competition. The goal isn't difficulty, it's expression, right? No one's going to be like, whoa, good one there with that tapping thing, 10 out of 10. Russia gave you 9.0. So yeah. That's number 5. It's about feel and not flash. All right. So those are the 5 pitfalls you want to avoid if you want to play for the song and not for the ego. And now it's time to put on my sultry commercial voice and talk about the Pentatonic Way. All right. It's something I built, and I'm proud of it. I want people in there because I love meeting guitar players and helping them get better. But this is something I made for everybody. It's for free, and it's a 5-part course. But I'll do the ad read. Ready? Here we go. Are you a box player, a scale drifter, a phrase shifter, or a fretboard explorer? Most of us are stuck in one of these categories without even noticing it. Head over to the Pentatonic Way and take the Pentatonic Personality Quiz. It takes 60 seconds and gives you instant, personalized advice for your specific level. Plus, I'll send you a free 5-day course designed to get you moving in the right direction. Stop guessing and start growing at pentatonicway.com/personality. All right, commercial done. But yeah, it's actually pretty cool. So whatever bucket you fall into, you get a 5-day free course based on that bucket. So if you're at this level, you get the 5 lessons to get you to the next level. And, it's customized. I thought that'd be cool. Anyway, go check it out if you want. If not, let's get into the 5 actionable tips to help you start soloing for the song. All right. So let's see. I have a backing track up here, and I'm going to try these out, try to demonstrate them while I'm playing for you guys. So let's take a look. The first tip is start your solo with one note. Pick a single note and milk it for all it's worth. All right. Think about vibratos, bends, rhythm, and as you'll instantly sound more intentional. So let me give that a shot. We have a 80s power rock backing track in A minor. So let's see what we got. Let me see if I can pick a right note for the... All right. So you can't stay on the same note forever, but that was, I think that went pretty well. I mean, it definitely, by staying on that one note, even though it went a little bit here and there, but mostly focused on that one note, to me, it felt like I was able to build the solo after that. A lot of times I'll come in to a solo hot. I'll be like, you know what I mean? And then where do I go from there? That's like doing the finale of the fireworks right at the beginning. And then they're like, oh, here's some other fireworks we have. And people are going to be like, wow, that's a letdown. So starting slow like that really helped. I mean, it's kind of extreme to just be like, I'm going to stay to just one note, but that's why it's an exercise. And maybe for some songs it'll work, but not all of them. But the idea is sound, where you just kind of maybe... I think of that Dream, was it Dreams from Eddie Van Halen? I don't remember the actual notes, but that's the whole solo at the beginning, it's just 2 notes. And he does it for a long time, and then, and then he goes off and, you know the one I'm talking about. Maybe you don't, and I sound like an idiot, but maybe both. So yeah, that's the idea. Just try to keep it simple. That's a good exercise that you can use to really ground you in the song and keep you restrained, right? Especially at the beginning. All right, tip number 2 is leave space after every phrase, all right? Force yourself to pause for 2 beats after each phrase, which may feel strange at first, but your solo will immediately sound more musical. All right, let's try this out. Let me go back to the beginning. This track. So for 2 beats, I have to pause. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. All right, that kind of works. All right, let me try it again. 1, 2. 1, 2. All right. They changed chords on me there. Yeah, I like that, man. It's a little scary, but at least, so like when I play, I am definitely guilty of run-on sentences, right? I'm like, you don't stop when you're playing the music. I don't want to stop because I'm afraid, I guess, that I won't find the on-ramp back in, right? I'm like, all right, I'm on the highway. I don't want to get off, but because I'm afraid I won't be able to get back on. Like I'll run out of ideas. But I didn't feel like that right there, and counting those 2 beats gave me something to do, and gave me a measurable time frame to be like, all right, hold, okay, go. And I was never like, oh, how do I jump back in? Like there was always something and it kind of related to the other thing. So I really like that exercise. I'm going to be trying that more. And I feel like 2 beats was a good amount of time. It's enough space that, it allowed the solo to breathe, and almost enough that you're like, uh-oh, what's wrong, right? That's the idea. But not too long where you're like, uh-oh, I think his guitar came unplugged or he might have passed out or something. So yeah, cool. Number 2, leave some space. Try to stop for 2 beats after each phrase. I'm going to be using that a lot. All right, tip number 3, repeat your first idea, right? This is the motif thing we're talking about. So whatever your first phrase is, play it again or slightly modify it, right? Like Zappa used to say, play it twice, make it nice, or if you shake it more than 2 times, you're playing with it. I don't know if that makes sense in this, context. But all right, let's try this. Whatever the first phrase is that comes into my head, I'm going to play it again. So I just start here on the track. Pop. Well, you got to be able to remember what you played. All right, we try it again here. First phrase, nothing else happened. All right, cool. So try to do some rhythmic variations with it. Whoop. Changed keys on. I changed keys on the song. Sorry, guys. All right, cool. Yeah, repeat your first idea. Try that. And then maybe try mixing that with then pause for 2 beats, right? All right, number 4, limit yourself to 1 pentatonic box. I mean, I think if you've listened to this before, pentatonic's my passion. I feel like that's the magic scale. You can do everything with it, nearly everything, 80% of what you need to do to a very high level. But try to limit yourself to one box, and I'd put a caveat on it. Try to make it a box that you're not that familiar with, that you don't feel as comfortable, because that's going to put you out of your comfort zone, which I think is a good thing. It's also going to make everything you play sound more spontaneous, because it'll be more of a surprise to you than it would be if you were just staying in box 1, box 4, whichever ones you feel most comfortable with. So let me try this and see what I can do with it, all right? And maybe I'll try to add the motif idea and the stop for 2 beats idea, but I'm going to stick to shape 5, because that's probably my least familiar one, especially in the minor realm. So let's see. I'll try that again. One, two. 1, 2. One, two. All right. That's the idea. Yeah, pretty cool. So what I was thinking about there is that in order to repeat something like a motif and repeat a phrase, you have to remember what you played. Some of those long ones, like you're like, oh, that was a cool phrase. Like repeating something like this, that's easy to remember. But when it's like a long thing, like, and you're like, all right, I'm going to do that again. You're like, how did I start? No, I think I don't know. You know, if you can get most of it right, that just lends into the variation sort of approach, right? But you definitely want to get certain parts of it right so it does sound like a repeated idea and not just a new idea, right? And I guess that just comes with time. I felt good playing in that shape 5. I was finding some new notes, and I could, I played pentatonics enough that I kind of have an idea of what it will sound like when I go somewhere. I mean, your fingers just kind of know after a while, which is cool. But still, yeah, shape 5 for the minor is not really what I do typically. And typically, I don't stay in one pentatonic for the whole song. I try to go match each chord with its own scale, each own pentatonic scale. So that was fun exercise. And I tried the 2-beat thing. I tried to throw the 2-beat thing also not at the end of the phrase. Try to throw it in the middle of a bar, as opposed to always in the same spot to sound, less predictable, more exciting. All right, that's tip 4. Tip 5, I can't really demonstrate it here. It's listening back to your solo. All right, and this is something that I think is the most important thing you can do, no matter what you're doing on the guitar, practicing, is if you record yourself and then watch it back or listen to it, because that sort of feedback loop is going to accelerate your improvement so much. You're going to hear things that you didn't notice when you were playing it, because when you're playing, you can't be as objective as you can when you're just away from it, looking from a distance or listening. You're just going to improve everything. It's such an opportunity, especially nowadays where everybody has a phone. Just set up your phone, hit record, either video or audio, and just jam. Do whatever you're doing. Play that song and sing that song you're working on, or try that, that new pattern that you'd been working on, whatever it is. But when you're doing it and you're trying these other tips, like the pauses and starting with one note, also, what was the other one? Repeat ideas and trying to stay in one shape, all these sort of exercises, record them, play them back. And then I think you're going to get a ton out of it for sure. Yeah. And then, ask yourself, did it serve the backing track, or am I just wanking, so to speak? All right. So cool. If you take one thing away from today's episode, let it be this. Guitar solos aren't about showing off. They're about showing up for the music. When you stop trying to impress, you'll start connecting with the song, right? You'll sound more relaxed, more musical, and ironically, more impressive. People will be more impressed by your musical solo than they will by your 800 ideas that you just throw up all over them. So if this episode resonated with you, make sure to follow the podcast, The Guitar Underground, on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, so you don't miss the future episodes. And if you know another guitar player who's stuck in that I know shapes, I know licks, but my solos still sound random stage, share this episode with them. Just say, hey man, thought you might like this. Try not to make him feel judged, but because sometimes because sometimes the breakthrough isn't learning more, it's simplifying the approach. And I think that's kind of what we did here. Final takeaway is ego fills solos with notes. Music fills them with meaning. That's kind of hippy-dippy. But anyway, I'll leave you guys with that. And I'll see you guys next week on the Guitar Underground. I hope you have a great day. We keep on playing, man. Take care.